what I'm going to teach you this morning, because it's been heavy on my heart since yesterday, is going to both encourage you and kind of give you direction to give you a realistic, you heard me repeat that before, a realistic expectation of what you're going to not only encounter, but what you will experience and go through, and the happy ending or the unhappy ending, depending on how you decide to enact this principle, okay? Now, as a lot of you guys probably know, I'm a huge fan of the Bible. I love the principles that are in there. I don't consider it religion. I consider it a relationship, and I do understand that these principles have worked. I mean, you're talking to a guy that came out of the bar business, pretty rough around the edges. You can't tell me that these principles don't work because I've tried them and found them to be true. Here's the one that I want you to write down. It's just a scripture that you can look at, and I want you to look at I want to break it down because I'm going to teach you recruiting through this scripture, and it's in the book of Mark. So Mark chapter 4, very simple. One of the reasons this story resonated with me so much is a training series, or a training CD I heard. I've referenced it multiple times, that if you have not picked it up, purchased it, or owned it, or listened to it, if you own it, in the last week, please get it. Go to Amazon.com or wherever and get this. It's by Jim Rohn, and it's How to Build Your Network Marketing Business. Even though it is absolute basic, the basic stuff, the content there is just amazing. In fact, if you listen to when you listen to it, if you've never heard it, you will notice that a tremendous amount of the stuff that I've always taught and I have done and I've experienced comes from those teachings by Jim Rohn, okay? It was you cannot get away from the basics of, gravity. I mean, these are some absolutes. I mean, if you were to ever look at what are some guaranteed things that you will know why something happens or why something doesn't happen, it's through that CD set. Now, there's three tracks right in a row that really, once he starts his story, it's track 6, 7, and I think it's 8 as well. But track 6. And that's not what the topic is today, but he talks about the law of large numbers, the law of averages. Basically says that if you do something long enough, a ratio will appear. Meaning that if you swing the bat as many times as you can, eventually you get a hit. Occasionally you hit one out of the park. And you guys know I've taught that before. I taught that. That was said to me by the number one money earner in the company I was in when I interviewed a bunch of people, okay? That the law of large averages dictates that, if you swing the bat long enough, it can eventually get a hit. Now, here's what I'm going to go into detail. The following one is Jim Rohn really broke down what I believe is a very, very good principle from the Bible that basically shares with you about the business and what you will encounter and why things happen or don't happen, okay? So let me go into this right now. The person that actually told this story was Jesus, and he basically says in verse 3, it's talking about the story of the farmer scattering seed, okay? And he says, listen, a farmer went out to plant some seed, and as he scattered it across the field, some seed fell on a footpath, and the birds came and ate it. Other seed fell on shallow soil with underlying rock. The plant sprang up quickly, but it soon wilted beneath the hot sun and died because the roots had no nourishment in the shallow soil. Other seed fell among thorns that shot up, choked out the tender blades so that it produced no grain. Other seed still fell on fertile soil and produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much as had been planted. Okay? He said basically that that was one of the most powerful scriptures that if you could understand this story. In fact, if you go down, that ended with verse 8. If you actually go to verse 13, he says, if you can't understand this story, how will you understand all the others I am going to tell you? Literally, Jesus himself said that is the most important scripture of stories and revelation that you should get under there. Now, here's what I want to do, and I'll break this down in network marketing terms because it really helped me and encouraged me through my career, okay? Let's say that the seed is our message, your message, okay? You're going out there and you have a story. We have a story of how people can change their lives financially. It's just a vehicle to achieve the dream, okay? The story is basically the seed that we plant towards people. Now, what you have to understand is the farmer went out to plant some seed, okay? You have to take forth the effort to go out there and plant the seed. People typically will not just randomly call you and say, I don't know what I just decided to call you. What are you in? Okay, that typically doesn't happen. So we got to understand that you are going to have to go out there and make the effort first. But it says in the second part of this, it says, as he scattered it across the field, some fell on a footpath, and the birds came and ate it. Meaning that when you tell your story, that it is not always going to be received. When it said that it fell on the footpath and the birds came and ate it, what's so funny about the way Jim Rohn talks about it, he says, well, if you ever talk to somebody and they said they were going to come to a meeting and and then they didn't show up, and he goes, now you know why. He said, the birds. That's exactly how he says it. So why does that happen? We don't know. He says you've got two options. You can chase the birds, or you can continue to plant seed. Because if you chase the bird and figure out why somebody didn't show up at the meeting or continue to do something, or who somebody said boo to the guy and he wouldn't go do it, didn't show up to the meeting because he'd heard it was bad or whatever. He says the problem with chasing the birds is you leave the field and you quit sowing. Okay. It also says here, other seed, verse 5, other seed fell on shallow soil with underlying rock, and the plant sprang up quickly. Here's how to address this one. Have you ever talked to somebody that initially and immediately they were really intrigued? They were like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is what this is amazing. I'm so in. But it soon wilted beneath the hot sun and died because the roots had no nourishment in the shallow soil. What happens there is, and I've had, I don't know how many instances where I've talked to somebody, I'll give you some perfect examples. This is some of my favorites. I've shared the story with somebody, and they would tell me, say, you know what, I really believe that this is an answer to prayer. This is amazing. This is what me and my family want to do. And I'm like, wow, this is awesome. This is great. And then all of a sudden they sign up, in fact. They may even sign up and say, well, we're going to do this. And then boom, they won't return your calls. They won't come to training. You can't figure out what the heck happened. And eventually I tracked some of these. I finally even quit tracking down people that maybe have gotten in and said that, they were done, just because it's a waste of time to try to figure out all the, things. And you can almost, by some of their answers, you can always figure out that they didn't go to training. They didn't follow the process. They didn't understand what they had. They didn't use the tools. They tried to tell the story themselves. They didn't follow, the directions. That's typically why people fail. And somebody said, well, is that one of them things? Or I had a buddy that tried a network marketing business 3 years ago, and he didn't make any money. They go, oh my gosh. So they had no root. They basically, the winds and the waves came, and there was no structure there. But he says, in chapter 7, verse 7, it says, other seed other seed fell among thorns that shot up and choked out the tender blades, so it produced grain. You can picture this as best friends and family and the naysayers. That you get somebody that's maybe new to the industry, new to the business. They get excited, they go home, they start talking to their family, friends and family, and all of a sudden those people just come out of the woodwork. And I'll tell you why I recognize a lot of times like that is people don't want you. A lot of times it's almost like the story of I think it's Dungeness crabs, that if you put a bunch of Dungeness crabs in a bowl or a bucket, that the one that will try to escape, the one that tries to climb up, the other ones will climb up for some reason and pull that one back in, and they will all starve to death together. Okay, not a lot. You got to understand, there's plenty of people out there that don't want you to succeed because it actually will amplify what they're not willing to go out and do. You guys have always heard me say this: do today what others won't, so you can live to tomorrow like others can't. It's totally their choice. Okay, but let's get to the good news. Okay. Still, other seed fell on fertile soil and produced a crop. Okay, that here's the other thing. It was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much has been sown. There are plenty of people. You got to understand there was 3 or 4 things right before the fertile soil of people that things happened, things that they said, oh, I don't want to be a part of it. You know, the sun got hot, the wind blew, or whatever the circumstances were that got in their way. But it did say that other seed fell on fertile soil. Fertile soil is soil that is right for a seed to grow in. I think I said this on the training call. I think when I had or one of those, I forget who I had on there, the Jacksons, basically said, that they're looking for people that want to do the business, not people that you have to force to do this business. I never beg or badger somebody to join my business with me, because if that's the case, then I always got to beg and badger them to stay involved. But still, seed fell on fertile soil that produced a crop that was 30, 60, and even 100 times as much. This is really important here, that if you work the numbers, if you weed through the people that the stuff happens to, you get to the people that sign up, that do something, understand there are still levels of what people are going to do in the business. Some are only going to be 30 times producers. Some are only going to do 60, and some are going to be 100-time producers. Talk is cheap. You know how many times I've signed people up that they said, oh, my gosh, when I do something, I do it big, and then I never hear from them again, right? But then I've seen some people that were ripe and ready to go. I will take a hungry person over a hungry person that's willing to learn the skills than a skillful person that has no hunger to go out and do the business every day of the week, and I will always outperform the guy that's very talented and very skilled. Heart and desire is the most important thing when you're looking for somebody that's ready to do this, that has the desire to do it. But I've got people that, and I've understood that if I put a handful of people in personally, that what's going to eventually happen is some of them are going to work the thing. Some of them are going to produce a handful of people, maybe just get the managing broker and build a little bit of book of business, and they're content with that. Some are going to get the RD, and they're going to enjoy the title of RD, but they're not going to push any farther past that. And then some are going to go out and push towards ED. They're going to be 100-fold producers. Okay, here's the thing. The ones that don't want to go from MB to ED, I won't force to. You can't do that. Don't sign up for that class, as Jim Rohn would say, because people are going to do what they want to do. The only thing that you and I can do to really, the reason I put the tools together, the reason I've got training systems together, is I allow, it creates an atmosphere where someone can succeed as long as they've got the heart and the desire and the will to do it. But you can't force it. That's why I have no problem out there personal recruiting, because I understand that scattering my story, scattering the seed, will fall on, some soil that's on rocky ground, some that's on a footpath, but some will get into the ranks of people and so on. J-Rack, I know I got you on here, and I know I went fast on that teaching, but John Rakatan, I'll give you, let's use some examples of what's happened in your career, and give us some stories. Maybe use some of the examples of some of the things that you've seen, sown, and produced or not produced. So, J-Rack, do I have you on here?
Yeah, Mike, I have you. But
real quick, I forgot I got to do a proper.
I'm going to go real quick. Let me just say this, Mike. You're one of the few guys I've ever met, though, honestly. And this is what I love about you, where you do not get your feathers ruffled. If somebody says they're going to do something, they don't do it. You meet everybody where they're at, which is very unusual. Guys, if you're listening to me, I'm telling you, very few leaders know how to meet people where they're at and help them build like Mike does. And that's huge. And that's why you're where you're at. And I'm only going to tell you this. I have had people come into my organization, Mike, and I thought they were going to crush this thing. And all of a sudden, the guy who's 23 years old, no experience in network marketing, has his first child, just gets married, crushes it, goes out there, becomes, an ED. I got a guy here in Cleveland like that, and it just blows you away. So where do you think you spend the time with? You spend the time with that young person or that brand new person that is willing, and I love it. But here's the thing. You're talking a lot of the stuff out of the Bible, the life lessons. I have learned the same life lessons. I was a Marine, rough around the edges. But I will tell you something. Nobody could prove me wrong about the experience that I've had in my life. But also, nobody could prove me wrong. I'm seeing now thousands of people, not 100 or a handful. Now I'm seeing thousands of people having success. So when someone comes up to me, Mike, and they make those excuses, I look at them, I'm like, you're just not talking to enough people. You're saying too much. You know, a lot of people, Mike, you know, the biggest problem I'm seeing really in all of network marketing is they lead with the opportunity. They lead with, instead of really telling their story, what is it doing for you? You know, that's what I do. I just tell my story. Hey, I pretty much when I joined, I was just a blue-collar guy, a warehouse guy. I tell your story. Your story sells. It always will. That's what, you know, the Lord did in the Bible. He told stories because people could relate to them. And stories sell. And I don't mean sell just to get somebody. That's not what you're doing it for. You don't want to just get somebody, then they become pretty much a brick. You want to get somebody that their story or your story matches their story that gives them hope so that they could move on and have success in this. And, Mike, you know, that's what you do. And the other thing, too, Mike, that's big is you build your teams around events. That's pretty huge, Mikey. So I'm just going to turn it back to you, brother. And
well, wait, I want to talk to you because you're not done. I'm not done with you, John.
Sure,
we can go a little longer here on this one. Okay. When John, what's funny is John and I had not ever met in person before. John's actually my sponsor. And, John, you just said something that really just went off in me about what's funny is he said about using stories, okay? I'm always telling stories. And what's funny is I don't repeat story because then it sounds prideful a lot of times. I'm telling what got me in the business. I told John, in fact, I've got a guy that's coming in today under one of my guys that I'm pretty confident this guy's going to go out and do it, but but if not, then I know why that worked. I know what kind of soil the guy really was. But I've got pretty high expectations. But anyhow, what's funny is I'm going to give you this. This is a good one. In Mark 4, in the same chapter, if you go to verse 26. Jesus also said, here's what it says. Jesus also said, here's another illustration of what it's like. A farmer planted seeds in a field, and then he went on with his other activities. As the days went by, the seeds sprouted and grew without the farmer's help. That's real important. I'll give you an example. I've had more people than you can know that I talked to months ago or years ago. In fact, a perfect example, and this is a great story, is J-Rack called me, John Rackatan, I call him J-Rack. J-Rack called me 3 or 4 years ago and planted a seed. 3 or 4 years ago. And for some reason, my soil wasn't ready. I was not fertile soil at the time. I think majority of you guys would probably I think, just as an example, John, you're probably happy that you stuck it out and continued to sow seeds to other people, and other people joined your business, and you watched your residual check, gradually grow up. And to the point, I told John if he wanted to, he could go ahead and quit, but he probably is not going to, because he's got a great residual coming in. But John called me up another day and basically probably checked on the seed that had been planted with me, and told me a story of the size of the residual. And at that moment, it burst up in me. And that's what got me in the business. Believe it or not, it was that simple message, that story of the guy, and he was making a really nice, big, fat residual. And John, more importantly, John didn't even know the guy that submitted the account and got the residual. Just 2 days ago, I got a phone call out of the clear blue. Just boom, I get a text, in fact. The text says, hey, Mike, I've decided I'm getting in because I got a guy that wants to join with me. And I look at it, I'm like, who in the world is this guy? And I thought about it. It was a guy that I talked to probably 4 months ago, and the guy said it's probably not good timing for me, and he left. And he moved. He moved from Florida out to Vegas. Well, somehow during that period, he had dropped one of his seeds, mentioned this to a guy that was in another company, and the guy says, this is incredible. I'm bringing my people over from another company because I don't like the way they're doing things. And he calls this guy and says, I'm in. Did you realize that if these seeds had not been planted, The other thing, too, is there will not be wasted harvest. Somebody's going to get harvest. It's just a matter of who's going to sow the most seed. Danny Piper talked about this on the last call. He says the person who wins is the person who shows the plan the most. That's networking 101. If you show the plan multiple times to multiple people and understand that the principles will always work in your favor of the law of averages and the way the seeds either will fall on certain soils and either not produce or produce, and some will produce 30, some 60, some 100, your life and networking will completely change, and you'll have an outcome, and you'll have a peace about what you're doing. You're not going to be in panic mode all the time to do the business. John Rakuten, you got any more kind words to us?
Hey, all I'm going to say, Mike, is, buddy, when I was in the warehouse, I was working 10 and 12 hours a week or a day overtime, and some of them were 14-hour days forced on us. And when I had a time for an hour or at lunch or in the evenings, I would drive to a meeting, I would plant so many seeds. And that, I got to absolutely, in 3 years, make enough income to retire. And I was working all those hours, and it is exactly the story. All I did, I was not ashamed of what I had. Number two, I was out there just planting seeds. If someone didn't want to do it, it didn't matter to me. It was already working for me. So I was the proof, and that's what happened. And my third year, I was able to say, to my wife, Bernadette, we can walk away from this when I'm 49 years old. And I did. I walked away from my company, my warehouse job, and I was able to go full-time. And that first year, Mike, my residuals jumped up almost sevenfold after I decided to quit. Think about that, okay?
Wow.
That's crazy. That's just crazy. So I'm off, buddy. I appreciate everything you're doing, your team. Oh, my gosh. I can't wait to meet everybody at the convention. I really can't. It's pretty exciting. So
going to be awesome. Well, thanks, John.
Thanks, buddy.
I appreciate it. Okay, guys, I'm going to unmute the line, say goodbye to you guys. If anybody's got any comments or anything,